Thank you very much for all the speakers before me and listening to the speakers. One of the things when you are the last speaker is that you can find at the last minute that many of your talking points have already been covered quite well. So I think what you will find in my remarks is some personal reflections throughout the last 3 years process. And I must also say that I'm somewhat like Ed. I tend to speak fast, and the other day when I had an interview with the New York Times reporter, Lauren was telling me that, can you speak a little slowly? And so this is how I speak, but I will try. And also I think it might be useful for Manish and others because I will be able to finish it in time. So this is a very special moment for me personally and for the team members and for many of you who are present in this room. I remember when we first started the kickoff meeting that we did in London, that was about 3 years back. And especially when you start on the GHG Protocol standards, there are a lot of uncertainties. And I was particularly worried when we were starting this work that how it will go, because remembering the experience from our previous standards, the timeline shifts so much over the development, and also the stakeholder process itself can be very difficult, and not in the sense that we find the stakeholders difficult, but in the sense that the debates and the solutions that kind of challenges you face in finding good solutions is a very, very hard work. And so concluding this today is truly a special moment and a very proud moment for many of us. And before I get into my presentation, what we thought we will do is show a short video film that I think can provide a good inspirational view on the significance of life cycle accounting.
This is a business, and these are greenhouse gases. Together, they have an amazing story to tell about profit, efficiency, resilience, and the climate. Like all businesses, this one wants to grow and be successful. It knows that being a successful business is about more than just selling products. That today's businesses track the health and profitability of their organization using a whole range of vital social and environmental indicators. And that greenhouse gases are one of the most revealing of all. Take carbon, for example. Managing carbon is a key ingredient to a successful business, and not just because it's good for the environment, it's also a way to save money, cut risks, and create exciting new business opportunities. That's why the World Resources Institute and World Business Council for Sustainable Development created the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. We work with businesses to develop standards and tools that help companies measure, manage, report, and reduce their carbon emissions. Over the last decade, we've helped thousands of businesses account for the greenhouse gases impact of their own operations and be more profitable as a result. It's made a big difference, but there's more to do. You see, every organisation has an impact that goes far beyond its factory gates or office reception. Take a company that makes cars, for example. Its impacts reach right back to sourcing steel and aluminium, through manufacturing the cars, delivering them to showrooms, driving them, and even recycling them at the end of their lives. Everything the car company does, from buying, producing, and selling its products, is called the value chain. With our new corporate value chain standard, companies can now see the full impact of their activities and figure out where they can make the biggest difference. For the car company, it comes down to answering questions like, what materials should we use? And how can we improve fuel efficiency? So now it can make informed decisions about how best to save money, design products, and cut risks in their business. But understanding the impacts and the life cycles of individual products gives businesses even more focus. Imagine the car company makes an SUV and also an electric car. Our product standard allows the company to work out how their impacts differ and how best to reduce emissions across the life cycle of each car, which means they can focus efforts on things like making the SUV more fuel efficient or working out the cleanest way to build and dispose of the battery for the electric car. Working together, our new standards give every business the ability to make decisions that increase competitive advantage, drive efficiency and innovation, and cut risks. If we apply them to thousands of businesses and millions of products all over the world, the positive impact on business and on the climate will be enormous. The Greenhouse Gas Protocol, the foundation for sustainable climate strategies.
Okay, so I think now, I don't know if I will be able to match the performance of this video film, but we'll see. So my job here is to share some reflections, and actually I think all the previous speakers have talked about the importance of the process and how great these standards are or might be. And I think some of you, and those especially who are not part of the process at all, might be thinking what is really contained in these standards. So part of my job is to go through some of the elements of these standards. Now, our journey started in 1998, and I wanted to have this slide just to have a broader reflection and look at our past and what we have achieved and whether we can draw some lessons and inspiration from what lies ahead of us. So in 1998, we started working on these standards, and the first standard that I think was published in 2001 and the revised edition in 2004, we became famous for the corporate standard. And one of the things I would like to highlight is that just by the publication of the standards, you do not achieve success. Standards are a means to an end. And as you can see, and Manish talked about some of these programs who have adopted the GHG Protocol standard, that ultimately what we would like to achieve is a successful use and implementation by businesses, those who are present here, as well as some major initiatives and programs. And there could be some new programs and initiatives also that we expect will be using these standards. So even though the standards have been officially released today, but as you can see in this slide, two programs, the Sustainability Consortium and the Consumer Goods Forum, they have already adopted the new standards, and they have announced that they will be using the product and scope 3 standards with their initiative and members. Again, I think some of these numbers have already been talked about in earlier speeches. So what I was thinking, what I should say here is that while this reflects the success that we have achieved in the past, it also in a way presents a challenge for us. And I would say that 72% of Fortune 500 companies were able to start using the corporate standard in about, I would say, 4 years' time. And so what a great day it will be if we are all sitting together and we can report that 100% of Fortune 500 companies in 4 years' time have adopted all the new standards. So this is the kind of inspiration that I would like to draw, and also present before us a challenge that I think we still have to do a lot of work to make these standards successful. We have talked about the opportunity, so I will again not spend some time. I think the example that Manish was talking about was that in the manufacturing sector, the emissions of a company from scope 3 could be between 80 to 85%. And this is a classic example that sometimes we'd like to highlight, that actually in some cases, for some companies, especially global household goods company, that example that we have here, it could be as high as 98% scope 3 emissions. So in introducing the two new standards, the message that I wanted to reflect on, when we started this work and how we started this work, I think some of you might actually be wondering that what led to the decision of developing these new standards. And I remember that it was in 2007 when I was traveling in New Zealand, and there my main job was to present our existing corporate standard. It was a kind of a roadshow, and it was very surprising for me to see that wherever I went, the kind of questions that I was getting were not on scope 1 and scope 2. The kind of questions I was getting is how would a company account for scope 3 emissions? Why is GHG Protocol not producing a new standard? And as I went deeper into this trend, I realized that New Zealand faced a very serious situation, at least some industry sectors, especially those who were in the dairy export business. So New Zealand sends dairy products in faraway places. And one of the things that the exporters were being asked to report on was food miles. And of course, I think the comparison that was being drawn, I believe was, suppose New Zealand is exporting dairy products to European market, and so the comparison was being drawn in comparison to the UK exporters or other countries who are nearby to those markets. And I think the interesting point here was that although stakeholders in terms of their intention were asking for the right kind of information because we need to be accountable, I think, for the full life cycle, but the point here was, when you look at this slide also, the focus was just on one category. And if they were being asked for the full life cycle, it would have made much more sense. But if you only ask your supplier to report on food miles or transportation miles, then it can be a very misleading comparison when you're just looking at one single category. So then another very important, I think, the story was published in Wall Street Journal around the same time, and I think that kind of also signifies the importance of Scope 3 standard, was that there was a story about a multinational company in the IT sector that kind of made a claim that they have become carbon neutral. And I was being interviewed for that story, and the Wall Street reporter asked me, do you think this company has become carbon neutral? And I said, no, not at all. And they asked me why. And I said that you look at their inventory, and they have covered just very small activities in their scope 3 emissions, employee commuting, business travel. And the kind of products that they manufacture, their largest source of emissions are in the use phase, and which are not covered here at all. And so the reporter then asked me, do we have a standard on how these companies can do their scope 3 accounting in a comprehensive way that you're talking about? So I said no. And that was the kind of signal, along with other early signals that we got, that was very clearly pointing out that there is a problem in the marketplace. There is a strong need in the marketplace to provide standards that can give a methodology which is comprehensive and where cherry picking would not be a problem. So the scope 3 is, in a way, that company now, if it would like to make a claim that it has become carbon neutral, it has a standard it can use and actually make a very credible claim. Now, specific to scope 3, what I would like to point out here is that, especially for those who are not part of the process, that the scope 3 standard in itself has been structured into upstream and downstream categories. I don't think you can really see very clearly here from this slide. The scope 3 standard has 15 different categories. And one of the very good things that I like about the scope 3 standard is that you can report, you're only required to report at a category level. So I don't know whether many of you know that you're not required to report scope 3 emissions as a total. What is the minimum requirement is that you should, when you set your boundary and you decide which categories are relevant and you would like to report on, then category level reporting is required. Now, some of the examples of kind of categories that you're not able to see are transportation and distribution, both upstream and downstream, and use of sold products. I think Linda had earlier mentioned about this, and one very important point I would like to highlight in the context of scope 3 is that it allows the use of variety of data. And you're not required to use primary data. You can also use secondary data, and I think that will be very, very helpful for companies, especially who are just starting on scope 3 standard. The product lifecycle standard, again, I think some of the points that I would like to highlight, first of all, as is obvious, we use lifecycle analysis to map the emissions of an individual product. It is based on the ISO standard, but customized for a single product LCA. It allows both cradle-to-grave and cradle-to-gate assessments. Assurance is required. And you will find that it provides some useful prescriptiveness around boundary setting, recycling, direct land use change impacts, biogenic emissions and removals, and data quality. So overall, I would say that both these standards provide a framework that is relevant not just for businesses, but also for programs and initiatives. And I think we will have a panel discussion on this point later in the session. Another element of the standard that I would like to highlight is that, that they are designed around some key inventory steps or accounting steps. And here I have shown you, I think it's only one standard, the different steps that companies will need to follow. So you start with the definition of business goals, review principles, review fundamentals, define the scope, set the boundary, collect data and assess data quality, perform allocation, assess uncertainty, calculate inventory results, perform assurance, and report inventory results, and finally set reduction targets. And again, I think Linda had earlier mentioned about this point. It's very important to understand that the standards by themselves, they are structured into requirements and guidance. So there's a certain set of requirements, but there are also some optional categories. And I think there is tremendous flexibility in the standards. You can make good, important decisions in terms of the different choices that we provide in relation to your objectives. So if your objective is to do public reporting, you may end up with a different set of choices compared to if your objective is just to do a quick internal assessment and identify your hotspots. So as you go through these number of different steps, you will find that there are some key decision points where you can exercise your choices. So these statistics have been mentioned earlier also, the development of the standards, the number of very important parameters here, but I was thinking about this slide, and I don't want to repeat, so what I would really like to reflect on a little bit is that for me, I think the numbers are extremely important, but what I really value from this process is the kind of experiences, learning experiences I felt all of us went through on this shared journey. I remember when we started this process after the launch event in London, the kind of enthusiasm that was displayed by technical working group members who wanted to participate and contribute was so unique compared to all our previous experience in developing the standards. And all these contributors, including many technical working group chairs, some of them are present here, it was all voluntary. And they spent long hours to come up with good solutions and write very good chapters. So these are the kind of things that I find truly inspirational. The kind of debates that we went through, life cycle accounting itself, I think many of you might realize is a long established field, more than 30 years of research work that has been already there. And I think this process was truly a breakthrough process in terms of identifying and differentiating between different kinds of issues in the context of this standard. So the debates around attributional versus consequential approach, the debate around the use of input-output data, these were really monumental debates in many ways. And to try to convince some of the LCA authorities to agree to some of these solutions that we were proposing, working with businesses, was, I think, a true achievement of this process. So looking ahead, you've already seen the video film, and I think I quickly just want to mention that along with the launch of these standards, we're also launching a new logo of GHG Protocol. And what you see here and you saw in the video film is that this logo represents a lens. And so this is a viewpoint here is that lens, it helps to focus on right kind of decisions, and it helps to reveal things which might be hidden otherwise. And we thought that this would be a very appropriate logo for the GHG Protocol. And we are also introducing a built-on GHG Protocol logo. This is for programs and initiatives that will be using these standards, and we would like them to then adopt this logo also and show this to their stakeholders. The journey moving forward, as I said, the standards are a means to an end, and there is still a lot of work to be done. And in our portfolio, the things that we plan include sector and product level guidance, helping programs adopt these standards, integrate these standards into their specifications, training. We've already talked to a number of companies, and they have expressed interest in doing training programs for their suppliers. And these standards are, although we're talking here sitting in New York City, but the true impact of these standards will go to countries like China, India, Brazil, where most of your suppliers are based. And so really training and capacity building will be an extremely important next step. I also want to highlight that in addition to the supply chain standards, we are also launching a policy accounting standard and a city accounting standard. So those who would like to know more about it, I can tell you later. So finally, I would like to thank you, our funders. I don't think I have time to go through this list, but again, I think without the contribution of these funders, and they're coming together collectively, and when we started this in 2007, those funders, I consider them as pioneers who really felt that this is an important piece of work and gave us seed funding. And that is how this started, and I really would like to express thanks to all of you who contributed financially as well in this process. And finally, thank you to my team. I can really cannot express in words the feelings that I have about my team, the pride I feel about working with this team. And I was thinking that if this is the team, I can do any number of standards, but not tomorrow. Let me have some time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pankaj. And also thank you to Ed and to Linda, to Terry, to Manish. And we have time now for some questions. And I want to first defer to some of the media folks who are here in the room, but it's open to everyone. We have microphones around the room, and I think they're being passed. And unless you have experience as an auctioneer or an opera singer, please use them because the room is big. And please identify yourself and your affiliation. So we'll get started with questions.
Hi, Steve Avedek with Citi. I have a question with regard to investments. Citi basically, our product is money. And so does that mean that we would need to go out, if you have a Citi mortgage, we're responsible for your home. Every swipe of your credit card, we're responsible for all the goods and services you purchase. We finance payrolls for other organizations. Does that mean we're responsible for the consumption of every individual that works for that company that we finance?
Pankaj?
Is it on? Anyway, I think that's a great question, and that's the kind of, I think, question that many of you must be having. And as you look into the standard, you might imagine, wow, is it really something practical? Can we really do it? And is it something meaningful and relevant? And I think it comes back to again, what I was saying, that actually you are in a decision-making role here. You first of all look at, there is a principle of relevance, and you have to look at that the particular category, how it's relevant in your context. And I think you ultimately go to your ability to make some decisions that can make a difference. So if you find that yes, there is an opportunity here to make decisions that can make a difference in your investments, then I think it's my personal view that you would perhaps want that to be established as relevant to your business. But where you find that actually you really don't have much opportunity to make a difference, you really don't have a decision-making authority and decide on different options, then that is the way that you thoughtfully apply the principle of relevance. But I think fundamentally you're right, that there is an investment category. And again, the challenge was to design these categories in such a way that they're broadly applicable. So in private sector, perhaps the relevance might be less compared to public sector financing. But the kind of financing and investments that, for example, World Bank does, the IFC does, These are some of very extremely relevant decisions that they make, and we expect them to be accountable to those decisions. And so, I won't be able to give you specific answers specifically to mortgage business or payroll finance, but you just have to see what kind of relevance these activities have, and then accordingly include them in the boundary. You can also not include them in the boundary and justify with some disclosure and justify that why you are not doing it. There could be a number of reasons, not only that it's important from decision-making perspective, but also you may not be able to get good quality data.
Yes, my name is Jim Fava, and I sort of wear two hats. One is I'm with PE International and 5-Win Strategic Consulting, but I'm also chair of the UNEP CTAC Lifecycle Initiative, and wearing that hat, I was a member of the steering committee. And with that, I'd like to thank the WRI and World Business Council. But Pankaj, you talked about the question is related to standards or a means to an end, which I fully support. So it's 2015. Describe a little bit that end change in behavior that we're seeing in terms of governments or companies, and maybe the other companies would want to comment as well in terms of what's that behavioral change we're seeing in terms of reducing greenhouse gases on a global basis.
Okay, I think from our perspective, I think one of the changes that we're seeing is a more, and this is why these standards help in terms of more awareness, is understanding the interplay between different things. It's very easy to get into your little camps, and there's a low carbon world and the water efficiency world and the energy efficiency world, but they are not only connected, but can actually have inconsistent effect on each other, where too much in one way actually has a detrimental effect on the other. So I think in 2015, what the absolute values will be, I don't know, but I think one thing we will see is more conscious concern about how these things all work together and coming up with a reasonable balance, compromise, rather than having extremes.
I guess I would add to that. So after 18 years in government, I've kind of given up on government dealing with climate for a while, at least in the U.S., right? But the void is being filled, I think, in a pretty promising and exciting way by industry. That's not to say we're going to get it completely right or do it sufficiently, but there's a lot happening. And I think what the standards allow us to do is figure out where to go first and maybe where to move the needle. And I think a perfect example is your discussion about, where does city fit or where does the financial, I really don't want you to have to track all of my expenditures to get your greenhouse gases down. But I think for a company like DuPont, it allows us to see where we might, again, as I was talking about before, use some innovation to address our customers' greenhouse gas hotspots, if you will. It allows us, again, as we go home and use this tool, where are the places we can get the biggest bang for the buck? If you think about greenhouse gases, you can spend a lot of time and money chasing things that aren't going to matter. And there'll be a lot of people that tell you to do that. I think that these standards allow us to take a step back and think a little bit more clearly, where is it going to make a difference? And both in terms of our own footprint, upstream and downstream, collectively, where we might be able to make a difference. In some ways, it's the interesting piece about not having a kind of a government regulatory regime ordering you to do it one way or another. Judgment maybe can have a bigger role, and I say that as a former regulator. But it does allow industry to look at the opportunities and maybe move there first.
Down here? Yes.
I'm Don Bain, Greenhouse Gas Management Institute. Congratulations, Pankaj. This is some good work. I want to come back to one of the comments that Linda made about discovery of the products that we have in a large company, for example. When we stand in the value chain of a global 500 company and look upstream and look downstream, the data problem gets quite large. And I wonder if you guys have particularly Thierry with your work at Alstom or Linda at DuPont, have you thought about what the best ideas for stewarding the data is once we implement the standard? In other words, should I be taking care of the data for my suppliers and maintaining it, or asking them to do it and link to it? And the follow-on question is, where does the business process for that reside? Do I keep it in my product design people and engineering people? Do I put it in purchasing, or do I put it in EH&S? Thanks.
You want me to go? Yeah, you can go first.
Data. We are wrestling with the data challenge everywhere. And so I'm not even going to limit it to the greenhouse gas issue. For those of you who are from Europe or in the manufacturing chemical parts of the industry, there's a wonderful program called REACH, which stands for the registration, evaluation, authorization of chemicals. And it has placed on companies like DuPont a massive data gathering program, the likes of which we really weren't set up to deal with and are scrambling and have been scrambling. So we've got the whole tracking of data around chemicals then, and it requires us to deal with our suppliers and our customers in a way we never had before. In addition, so we've got that one, we've got the greenhouse gas requests for data. Again, we used to follow data as a global corporation on a plant-wide basis. We are getting more and more requests for it on a product basis, which is why the standard will be helpful. And we are wrestling with, and I would say DuPont probably comes to the table with not the most advanced data systems to begin with. Some companies are way ahead, others are not. So we are really looking across our businesses and all of our functional organizations to look at how best to gather the data. We, because we are seeing these regulatory systems spring up globally, REACH and China's evolving, we need to look at country data, not business data, so we have to collect data differently than we used to. At the same time, we are also looking at the efficiency data around energy, and we're going to try to fold in the greenhouse gas pieces to it. But it's quite complex. Long way of saying I don't really have an answer, but we're not looking at it in a vacuum of just how do you track greenhouse gas data. We're looking at it from an evolving set of data different stakeholders need for a variety of different reasons. And it's makes everybody swallow big.
Well, I can only go in the same direction. If you look at the way business is managed, either in the very short-term management, with financial accounting, you have data coming at a very micro level, ramping up all the company. If you are working in strategy, more long-term, you have also the same data used, external data, public, or obtained through consultant, market data from different sources. Companies are managing data all the time, both for the short term and the mid-long term approach. GHG data will follow the same kind of flows. Some will be provided by customers, by suppliers, some will be provided by consultants, advisory companies, some companies will organize data banks. We have that in the energy, we have in our data, we have other private sources. You can complement them with the IEA and with other more public sources. And a normal business use all this, and GHG will follow the same track. So there will not be one particular set of sources. And the way it is located in the company, same thing. You have strategy people, you have the EHS people, you have the day-to-day management, the operation level. So all these are manipulating all this kind of data, whether market, sales, GHG, finance, and it will be the same thing again for GHG and all the data needed for sustainability. And actually, the beauty of it is if you think, as WBCSD thinks, that sustainability is basically a kind of glue which goes everywhere in the company, it's normal that data related to sustainability are produced everywhere. If you have only one department dealing with it, you have a separate thing, you have, oh, these are the guys of GHG, but then you don't align your whole company on the goal to manage and reduce. And so the way business processes are evolving, in my view, will answer in the same way. It will be from everywhere. It will be managed in a lot of places. And the challenge is to organize the internal processes to make the consolidation at some stage. But that's more difficult than for financial data. So we know it's not easy every day. So it will be the same thing for GHG as well.
Pankaj?
Yeah, just quickly, I think it's a very important issue for businesses. I have a sense, talking to companies, that they're feeling overwhelmed, actually, in terms of kind of data requests you receive on a day-to-day basis. And I think there is a need for some new thinking on this issue. That I think perhaps there is an opportunity for businesses to provide leadership also. When you look at these standards, whether these standards could be, and you're talking to your suppliers, you're engaging your suppliers. So can you use these standards to collect data, not just on GHGs, but also water use, energy use, other important issues for you in the connection of supplier engagement? I would really encourage companies to think in such a comprehensive way and see what the experience is and inform us, because I think that will give us some guidance. What should be the next step? Because we are focusing on GHG-focused standards, and if the practical need is broader, and you should not be using multiple standards, as long as they can be used with a consistent common methodology, we need to think about it. So that's my, that's my request, that if we could get some guidance and feedback from businesses in using these standards, that will be wonderful.
Thanks, Pankaj. I'm been given this, so if you have questions that you want to speak with our speakers and our panelists about, please do individually. We're going to take a 15-minute break. There's food in the hallway. Please get something and come back by 10:30. Before we go, though, I want to thank our speakers again and give them a round of applause.